competition is a form of insecurity. There's a part
Yeah.
of you that feels worthless, not
Yeah.
enough. And so you try to show up the other person to
Yeah.
feel good about yourself and fill that void.
Welcome to the Love Atlas. I'm your host, Sanana Sharma, and today I'm excited to have Ektha Agarwal with us. Ektha is a founder of Shakti Therapy and an expert in women's health and cultural identity. She works to help people, especially when it comes to the South Asian community, to find balance, well-being in their lives. So join us today as we chat about life, relationships, friendships, and discover how to just embrace the beauty around us. So Ektha, welcome.
Thank you, Susanna. It's so nice to be here, and I'm excited for our conversation today.
What have you learned about yourself through your experiences, especially when it comes to love and relationships?
Yeah, let me start by saying I love love, and it's just
Yeah.
been a big, vibrant part of my life from a very young age. And in the beginning, I thought I knew what it meant to give unconditional love to others and also feel hurt when it was not returned. And I think that's like the key word. That's what I thought love was like. You give this love unconditionally, and then you're going to get it all back. And one of the most significant realizations I learned is, gosh, love isn't about giving it to get it. It's investing in your own self and pouring so much love in you that it pours out organically onto others. And I'll say it's not even until my 30s that I actually realized what does I love really mean and how it starts with me in the South Asian communities and growing up, there's just so many multitude cultures that teach us the complexities of love.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly, in the South Asian community, we have hundreds of different words to describe love.
Yeah.
Love for taking a bite of an apple and the juiciness, love with a friend, romantic love, deep, unconditional love.
Yeah.
And so we can see how big it is. But with that also comes a lot of personal expectation
Mm,
that's put on you. And
right.
so it's about undoing that and relearning that there is power in self.
Yeah.
And love isn't always about others, it starts here.
Yeah, yeah. And like movies, as you mentioned, growing up, movies can be so deceiving as well. What do you think about everything that we are taught along the lines of what men should do and what women should do? How should they behave? Because, for me personally, growing up, I watched a lot of Bollywood movies, and that to me was love. Like, oh, Shah Rukh
Yeah.
Khan, DDLJ, like that's how it should be. And that's what we all
Yeah.
did.
Yeah, no, totally. Exactly. It's like running behind trees and peeking over and seeing as the other person peeking and turning your back and crossing eyes. I mean, all of that is what I feel like tainted my concept of love. And on one end, I really enjoyed it because as a female, it puts you back into your feminine energy where you're so receptive and you're so radiant and you're so open to these beautiful experiences.
Right.
And then we also learn too much of anything is toxic,
Yeah.
right? And so we build all of these fantasies and expectations. And when we don't get it, we're disappointed. And we begin
Exactly.
to believe, oh gosh, we're not loved. And that isn't even the reality because that's not even the depiction of what love is.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what has been I would say your biggest challenge when it comes to um friendships or romantic life, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, this is a good one. This is juicy. So I've dedicated both personally and professionally a considerable amount of effort towards self-improvement and reaching these higher states of consciousness. So for me, it goes beyond just human behavior. It's really moving into this mental and spiritual state.
Hmm.
And with that, there comes just a lot of deep internal work, and
Hmm.
it can be immensely rewarding when you get there, but it also has its own unique challenges that are specifically related to romance and friendships.
Hmm.
And if we look at romance, for me, it's the aspect of finding a partner who resonates at that vibrational level has been really challenging for me. Being single, in my experience, it's often in the past been about waiting for someone to come to you
Yeah.
who shares similar experiences and interests and is willing to commit to you. And I think that that is something Bollywood has taught me. And I think that is actually a flaw.
Mm-hmm.
As women, as people, we shouldn't be waiting.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I love to tell folks is, specifically women and their feminine energies, is don't be someone who is waiting around. Be a chooser, right? And when you are chasing, you're in that waiting game, but stop chasing and be a chooser. So sit back, relax, sit into your high valued sense of self, that higher vibration that knows
Yeah.
that when that time comes, you will meet someone at that vibrational place. But
Yeah.
at the same time, that waiting game, that journey, that sense of investing in yourself and being single and enjoying it, it can be very lonely
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
disconnecting. And I would say even in friendships, right? As you grow and you progress spiritually and mentally, again, not everyone is on that page. And
Mm-hmm.
so you begin to struggle with connecting with folks because they don't quite understand you. They
Right.
might think you're too foo-foo or too playful or not grounded enough, whatever, fill
Yeah.
in the gaps there.
Meeting a person on the same vibration, it is absolutely very important. And I
Hmm.
think that, no women or man should settle for less. And it can be lonely. But at the same time, I think once you start really learning about yourself and you start enjoying your own company, that is when good things happen. I remember growing up, my mom would always tell me, really focus on yourself and focus on the things that you love. And there just was so much emphasis on that, but I never really understood that. I'm like, I would be sitting by myself and thinking, like, I'm so bored. Like, what do I do?
Yes.
Like I
Yeah.
always wanted friends around me. I always wanted people around me. And I think eventually, as you mentioned in your 30s, that's when I realized the precious time I love when it comes to being with myself and really enjoying it. And just it feels so fulfilling at this point that my cup is so full when I'm by myself. Whereas when I was younger, I was just constantly seeking for connection, whether it was friendship or,
Mhm.
finding that right person. And there was just so much
Mhm.
focus on that versus being content. And I think being
Yeah.
content is so important. And as humans, we do crave connection and we definitely do need connection. Being with
Mhm.
my partner at the moment, I started off where it was just we were focused on each other. And then as our relationship developed over the years, you start realizing what really matters to you, even
Mhm.
within the relationship, and how important friendships are as well. So that's what I'm working on at the moment, just really keeping that bond with my friends alive and making sure that actions in my life and the focus is not just that one person, because if the focus is that one person, then you're only hurting yourself, and
Mhm.
it's not a healthy relationship then.
Right. Life is so dynamic
Yeah.
that it's meant to be spread and the focus is meant to be shared. And
Yeah.
I really enjoy how your journey has transitioned into that. And
Yeah.
I think, COVID made me realize, like, there's all of this focus on social media as stimulation and for us to get our dopamine hits. But
Hmm.
relationships and connections are the same thing. They're distractions, not all, but overdoing the relationships and connections like you were sharing.
Right.
They're distractions from really focusing on ourselves, and being bored is so healthy.
Hmm.
Ideas are generated, and this is research based. Ideas are generated when we're bored.
Hmm.
And recently they found out over the last like 10 years, the number of ideas generated has gone down drastically because we're so overstimulated.
Mhm,
No
mhm.
time for our mind to settle and think. And a healthy relationship is one that is boring. It is one
Right.
that follows routine and there
Yeah,
is healthy communication and those highs and lows
of
where your
course.
nervous system is excited and
Yeah,
deeply anxious and excited and deeply
yeah,
anxious.
Yeah.
isn't there. But we take those highs and lows as, oh, this is a great relationship, but our bodies, it's not.
What's one of the most valuable lessons you've learned from your past relationships or even dating experience that you can share with people who are in this field at the moment?
Yeah, a valuable lesson. Let me think about that. I would say what I've learned from my past relationships and dating experience is that there's just no perfect person. A lot of us have this image
Mm.
in our head of, this is the type of person I want. They look like this, they act like this is the way they talk, this is how they're going to treat me. And that version of perfection doesn't exist in ourselves, nor does it exist in our partners. But
Mhm.
we create this image and we live by it. And I think Seema Auntie had it correct. Like, whatever her percentage was, 60%, and you go for it.
Right, right.
But I don't think she really sat there to really explain what that means.
Yeah,
And having that perfect image of, this is what a partner looks like, is actually deeply harmful. It sets
yeah,
unrealistic expectations for ourselves and
right.
for them. So before you've even gotten to that date or that relationship, they've already failed, because
Mhm.
no human is perfect. We're beautifully flawed, and that's what makes us who we
Yeah.
are.
Yeah. And I think when you go into a date, like, first of all, recognizing that, whoever you're meeting is not going to be perfect and you're not either. But I think once you really know your values and what you stand for, you'll know very soon with right when you start conversing with the person. And I think that is so important to be able to really know what your where you stand and what your values are. So when you do meet that person, you'll know, okay, do you even want to go on the second date with this person? Because there's no wasting time, right? Because as you mentioned, when you know yourself, either you're going to meet there or you're not. And that's the truth.
Absolutely. Earlier, you had mentioned, the universe gives you what you attract and what you're putting out. And today, now you just mentioned values. And what I really think about is, it's all about becoming that best version of yourself, not for your
Mm.
partner, but for you.
Yeah.
You attract who you are. And so if you are someone who wants a partner who works out and has a spiritual practice, but you go work out once a week and then you meditate or pray once a month, then what you're asking for and what you're
Yeah,
attracting are not in alignment.
definitely.
And so
Yeah.
you have to, if you're looking for that healed person, it starts with dedicating that healing to yourself, working on your past traumas.
Right.
This doesn't mean you can't be in a relationship while you're healing. Of course you can.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to remember that what you're attracting starts with who you are. And there's actually three things that I do every month to check in with myself. The first thing is an alignment check. Every month, I ask myself this question: am I in alignment with my values this month?
Mm-hmm.
And I have 3 to 5 values that I have written down. And I look at them and I say, okay, well, value number one is for me health, since we're talking about that anyway. How did I exercise this value? How often did I go work out? How often did I take my
Yeah.
vitamins? How often did I not eat fried food? Whatever it is that you define health in.
Yeah.
And so this allows me to be intentional and purposeful and live my life with integrity so I can attract that.
Yeah, that is 100% accurate. I think that
Mhm.
sometimes we have these high expectations and we're not even following them ourselves. And in order
Exactly.
to attract the right person, first you have to be the best version of yourself so that
Yeah.
person will eventually come into your life. And I think there's so much focus on what age and like, obviously like as a woman, like your biological clock. And I think
Mhm.
sometimes you just have to put that stuff aside because you rather be with the right person than
Mhm.
rush into anything.
And there's so many opportunities today to put that aside. You can go freeze your eggs and,
Yeah.
pass over that biological clock challenge.
Right.
Age nowadays is becoming more and more acceptable to date folks who are older or younger, and that's seen as okay.
Yeah.
Interracial couples are such a beautiful thing and celebrated in today's world.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that is important.
Yeah.
Uh,
And yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I would say the other thing is also keeping in mind, if you want a man that's like very masculine as a woman, asking yourself, am I in balance with my masculine and feminine energies? And am I allowing my partner to step into his masculine?
Yeah.
In today's world, so many women, which is so incredible, are owning and running their own
Yeah.
businesses.
Yeah.
But that puts us in our masculine energy, and we
Yeah.
show up on this date like we're the protector, we're the provider, we're present, we're asking all the questions. That
Yeah.
puts the man in his feminine energy, and he just gets to sit back and relax when that should be us.
Right. Right.
But
Yeah.
we're creating that dynamic, you know? So
Yeah.
how balancing these energies.
You have to really connect with the right people as well, because if
Yeah.
someone makes you feel less than for who you are, if you're a CEO of this company and this is what defines you and you love working, that's who you are. And that right person will be able to match your energy and be like, oh
Mm,
my goodness, I respect you so much for doing this.
mm,
And this is what I have to offer. And it just balances out naturally.
yes. I love that. I think respect is so important in this process. And I want to challenge something, if I may, with you.
Yeah.
So important to respect each other's interests and portions of who you are, but that's not all of who you are. You're not just a CEO. And so
Right.
we forget that as people, right? We
Yeah,
come in with our identities of our work.
you do.
You're also this like fun, loving other version of you
Yeah.
that could care less about your
Yeah.
work in those moments when you're on vacation, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think it is a balancing act of finding someone who receives you and loves you for who you are, but also understanding that you are many identities.
Right. Absolutely.
One, and you get to bring all of those identities with you. Like
Right.
these, the CEO, for me, the Muay Thai practitioner, the living room dancer, the
Yeah.
person who loves the fire, and
Right.
whatever it is, it's
Yeah.
bringing all those versions of you to that date.
Right. I think ultimately what really matters is being a good person, right?
Yeah.
Like how compassionate are you? How empathetic are you? And the reason why I mentioned the whole CEO thing is because when it comes to our Indian society, the focus is so much on, especially, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, especially when you go on this first date, kind of frustrating to just talk about what you are doing on your day to day, especially when it comes to your work life. But at
Mm-hmm.
the same time, what we know is as soon as we meet someone, oh, so what do you do? And
Mm-hmm.
it comes down to your occupation. Unfortunately, that's the way people connect.
Yeah. I actually avoid that question altogether. And there's been many times I'm, you know, talking to friends and like, oh my gosh, tell me about this person. I'll tell them all these things. And like, wait, but what does he do? I'm like, I actually don't know.
So
And it's
yeah.
it's the best feeling. And
Yeah.
so when
Yeah.
someone asks me, what do I do? I'm like, oh, I save the world. Can I just tell you how I save the world? And I add play and I talk about like a moment I may have had where I offered help to someone.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then it changes the conversation. And I just took that question and changed it all together. And
Yeah.
they just learned about my values. They just learned about moments that are important to me.
Yeah.
I get to now learn the same. What do you do in your life?
It's so interesting because it just reminds me last week a group of us were playing beach tennis here in Santa Monica. On Tuesdays we go sometimes, and like there were a group of Indian people who had approached us, and the first question that this guy asked was like, oh, so what do you do? What company do you work for? And then we
Wow.
were all standing there and we're like, we're playing beach tennis. Can we talk about something else and
Yeah,
have some fun here? But I think, and it's not the other person's fault either, because that is all he knows. And
exactly.
that's what he was taught growing up. The emphasis on like, oh, maybe let's network. Maybe this is what
Yeah,
I'm supposed to do here. And like ask people what company they're working for.
right. And I love that, love what you said. You can't blame anyone because it's so normalized. Who are you? What do you do? Where do you live? How many siblings do you have?
Yeah.
Right? Like those are just standard questions we've grown up and we've been
Yeah.
taught to ask. And our journey has been unlearning that and trying to be creative and actually getting to know the person beyond this external identity that they have, that you can look on LinkedIn and Google that.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I guess it for someone who is working on looking past that, because especially within our community, there's just so much focus on that. Um, as you mentioned, unlearning, what would be the first steps for someone to unlearn all of these things that they're taught? Because if that's what they're focusing on.
Yeah, yeah, no, I love that. So I have something called a board of life. Just like you have a board of directors, if you have a big company or a nonprofit, I have a board of life because my life is really big and exciting, and I need a team that's got my back, that's looking out for me.
Yeah.
And in my board of life, I have two family members, I have two friends, I have a healer, and I have an astrologer. And the last person is a person that fluctuates year to year. And this allows me to see if that person is genuine, if they really care for me, or is it someone who's going to just stick around temporarily or feel jealous of me or talk ill of me behind my back. So I always have a person fluctuating to see where they'll fall, if they'll become part of my board of life or not.
Right.
And this is, we all have blinders and we don't really see the things that we do wrong all the time, and we tend to see other people's behaviors as wrong and ours as right.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make you a bad person, that's just being human.
Yeah.
And that's how our brain works.
Yeah.
And so having a board of life, it allows me to go back to them and ask, like, hey, what are some awesome interesting questions to ask someone you're getting to know?
Yeah.
And you get everyone's experience, and family is going to offer something really wildly different than a healer versus than a friend. And so having that perspective, I think, is so important. And so the first thing I would say is check in with your support systems and see who would you want on your board of life. You need a maximum of two, a minimum of two people, so it doesn't have to be a big board,
Yeah.
but these are folks that you trust. They keep you grounded. They keep you feeling alive and playful. They help you manage your blind spots, and they celebrate your wins.
Yeah. Someone who is struggling with I guess connections, I would say, I get a lot of
Mm.
people asking, especially the younger generation asking me this question, where they're sometimes even in toxic, whether it's relationships or even friendships, where they're seeing some red flags, but it's really hard for them to distance themselves from certain people, especially if they've grown up with certain people and they just have history with them. So, do you have any advice for people who are struggling with that, especially when it comes to friendships?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. One thing I'll say is red flags are subjective. So what may be a red flag for you, Sunana, may not be a red flag for me. And
Yeah,
so keeping that in mind, I know there's a lot online and in social media that says these are red flags and these are green flags. And so we have to
right.
be very, very careful.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so I would say assess that. And if you are not feeling connected, something to ask yourself is, why am I not connecting?
yeah,
And I'll share a story here. Last 2 years ago, I felt like I wasn't connecting with any of my friends at all.
yeah,
And I just thought that I had outgrown them and I needed new friends. And I went on this journey of trying to figure out who can I create, who can I but develop a relationship with and make them as a new friend.
right.
And throughout this journey, I also went to Mexico City and I lived there for about 2 or 3 months.
Wow.
And when I came back, that's when I had the realization, gosh, it had nothing to do with my friends being wrong. It was me.
Wow. That gives me
And
the chills. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, it
yeah,
wasn't until I left that environment,
right.
experienced everything differently, and came back and realized
Yeah,
how I feel so connected to my friends. They checked in, they showed up.
right.
What was I thinking?
Yeah.
And what did I allow myself to believe to feel disconnected?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I would say, like, definitely check in with yourself on that. And you could check in and realize, like, no, maybe I've outgrown them.
Yeah.
And
And it's so interesting that you say that because I'm thinking about the pandemic. That's when a lot of my friends started having kids.
mm,
And that's when I started feeling a lot of disconnect. Obviously, pandemic time, we were pretty much indoors and felt lonely. And I remember questioning my friendships as well. And then I started
mhm,
resenting some of my friends, thinking like, oh, this is their life now, and not understanding the fact that they're moms now and their life is very different now. They have
mhm.
in-laws to deal with, and they have,
Yeah.
so many dynamics when it comes to families. Um, And it took that realization for me to really learn that they they're still my girls. I've known them
Mhm,
since high school, and they still love me, and they still are my best well wishers. And
mhm,
even though I'm putting in effort and they might not be as um present when it comes to our friendship, it's also a phase that people go through. Sometimes people need to go through that in order to really um come back to the friends. And
mhm,
at the end of the day, we don't need to talk to each other every single day. And I had to go through that because I remember I love expressing myself. And for me, I would say since high school, since middle school, I've been the type of person where talking to friends all the time, like, hey, this happened. So let me call one of my friends, and just
mhm.
not sitting, as I mentioned earlier, not sitting by myself. And then after going through that, I realized it's so important to check in with yourself, because there's a lot of times for me especially, the biggest quality that I always wanted in a friendship is loyalty. And a lot of
Mm,
times I questioned certain people who would enter my life, are they loyal or not? And then I
mhm,
would find out eventually that I don't want to be friends with certain
mhm,
people. But at the same time, also going back to, as you mentioned, checking in with yourself, like
mhm.
what can you tolerate and what can you not tolerate? And forgiveness is also huge. But like, I think it's important to understand also your gut feeling when you are feeling off about someone. It's okay to also just let that person go
Yeah.
too.
I think
Yeah.
taking space always brings clarity. So there's no need to rush in a decision. You can always just put
Yeah.
a pause on that friendship
Right.
and let your emotions settle.
For sure.
Emotions are episodic. Emotions are not the truth. Emotions are manipulative. So when you let your emotions settle, you'll start to find clarity and you'll start to find truth. And
Yeah.
that's going to be more chances than not, your emotions and clarity are going to be very, very different. And
Yeah.
your gut feeling is not present when you are emotional.
Yeah.
That's your anxiety talking
Yeah.
in your gut,
That's
right?
a really good point. I was watching Oprah Winfrey's show the other day, her new episode, and then I also posted on my Instagram where she mentions, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this. She mentions even if there's a tiny bit, a hint of jealousy when it comes to any friend, that
Mhm.
person basically should be out of your life. How do you feel about that? Because that's something I've been thinking about a lot.
Yeah. It's interesting. So I saw that as well, and I evaluated my board of life, and it's interesting when I look at my board of life, it's mainly made up of men. And I think in the South Asian community, as women, we are still getting to a place where we lift each other up. We're not there yet. And so when I look at a lot, and this isn't true for all, but when I look at a lot of the South Asian female friendships I have, there is a hint of jealousy. There is a hint of talking behind my back. And so have I cut them out? Of course not, because we're human and I realize that we all have our own growth, but I recalibrate how much of myself I give them. And so
So,
there's truth to what Oprah is saying. And I will also say Oprah is a star and she has the luxury of meeting thousands of people every day. Not everyone has that. So if you cut
right.
out everyone who has a hint of jealousy for
Yeah.
you, you might end up lonely.
I think it's a struggle, as you mentioned, when it comes to our community, because a lot of my friends are non-Indians,
Mhm,
the ones I grew up with, and haven't ever felt even a hint of jealousy, like
mhm,
whatsoever, just uplifting each other. And, I have a few Indian friends too. And like, to be honest, there's been a little, I've felt some certain things here and there, but with my non-Indian friends. And I think it's so funny because I was talking to my fiance and I was telling him, I'm like, I always want to connect with more Indian people. And I love, like, I speak Hindi, and like that's my way of connecting, and just, kind of like a soul sister type. And I'm like, it's really hard though, because there's always that competition of trying to one up one another. And growing up, I've just pretty much been traumatized by that, because anytime guys were around, it's like, oh, I need to look better than her. I need to feel a certain way. I need to be the hottest one in the room, versus just uplifting one another and just being genuine and sweet and kind. And
ah,
I think I've always struggled to find that. And it's pretty cool connecting with you, and we're on the same page about
mhm,
this. So did you also feel that
mhm.
growing up?
Gosh, Sunana, I feel like you are preaching my life here. So, 100%. I
Yeah.
remember a couple years ago, I met this girl and I connected with her. She's South Asian. And I was so excited. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's phenomenal. And we
Yeah.
get to the subject of dating, as all women do.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh, yeah, I went on this date with this guy. And I happened to know who she was talking about. So I shared that I know. And she's like, oh, well, he's off limits because I've gone on 2 dates with him. It didn't work out, but you can't date him. And that brought up just so many inner child wounds of
Yeah.
competition,
Yeah.
that, hey, this is my box and my territory. You're not allowed to touch anything in there. Verse, and I
Right.
know this sounds bizarre, but verse this idea of, hey, sharing and loving, and it's
Yeah.
what's mine is yours. And
Right.
that's competition has really distorted the notion of connection and community in the South Asian cultures.
And also it lacks trust, right? Because
Mhm,
it's
mhm,
basically like, hey, I'm not even that type of person to do something like this. So the fact that you're even bringing that up is just, it's a lot of
mhm.
insecurity, and it's a lot of unfortunately comes down to competition, always competing and trying to one and up one another. And I think that for me has been the biggest struggle, and
Mhm,
I'm still trying to, open my heart out and still connect with people, but somehow I've been pretty disappointed, and
mhm.
you get disappointed so many times, you just kind of shut down then, and you're like,
Yeah.
I'm fine with this safe group that I have over
Mhm.
here, my non-Indians who are just so uplifting and so
Yeah.
empowering, where I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my goodness, I want more Indian girls like that. Where are they?
Right, right. And you nailed it. It's competition is a form of insecurity. There's a part
Yeah,
of you that feels worthless, not
yeah,
enough. And so you try to show up the other person to
yeah,
feel good about yourself and fill that void.
right.
But at the top, we're not competing. We're
Yeah.
actually cooperating and lifting each other up. And the road alone is so lonely that even when you're successful and you make it, if you're alone and you don't have a community that you're working with, you have no one to celebrate with at the same time.
Yeah, and I actually had to check myself as well to think, I'm like, okay, is this if I'm coming across this, is it me? And I had
Mhm,
to sit down with myself and really think, am I putting anyone down, or am I saying certain things to make anyone
mhm,
uncomfortable? Is it my personality that makes people a little bit more intimidated? And the truth is that after learning a lot about myself, I'm like, no, I'm like super kind, I'm compassionate, I'm always uplifting everyone. So why is it
mhm,
that like I'm always the one being attacked,
mhm.
Eventually going through that, I realized like there's no point of even blaming myself for this. It's just the way our community unfortunately is. And with men, it's different. Men, it might be a
So
little bit more,
different.
yeah, it's very different. And I've spoken to guys about this too, and they're like, no, we just talk about basic stuff and we talk
Yeah,
about finance and stuff and we move on with our lives. They
yeah.
don't sit there trying to be, like the best one in the room and
Analyzing and
exactly.
yeah. Yeah, and I will say, when you said, am I too intimidating? Be as intimidating as you want, because you're
Yeah,
only intimidating to the person that chooses to be intimidated, right? Like,
exactly.
all of you is so awesome, and
Yeah.
you should just be that.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm.
And I think that's so important. And I think that's it's great. I'm so happy that I connected with you. I feel like
Me
we're
too.
and it's just nice to have these kind of conversations and just connecting on that and validating each other's feelings, because a lot of times I feel as if I'm the only one feeling this way. And I
Mhm,
remember growing up just crying to my parents and saying,
mhm,
I
mhm.
really want to be friends with Indian people. Like, I really want to speak Hindi. And I just don't find that, like, I have all these non-Indian friends and I love them so much, but sometimes you miss that piece of you where it's like that's what I connect with. I moved from India
Yeah,
at the age of 7, and grew up watching all these Bollywood movies.
yeah.
So and I don't have a lot of family around here. So for me, it's kind of like, my friends are my family. So I've
Mhm.
always tried connecting with the Indian community. And then as soon as I would connect, sometimes some certain things would happen. I
Yeah,
would back away then and be like, you know what? There's no point.
yeah.
There's no point.
Yeah, and I think something worth recognizing is female friendships in India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh
Yeah.
are so different than female friendships in the United States.
Yeah.
That sense of
Yeah.
competition is primarily amongst folks in Western communities versus
Yeah.
folks in India. And I think we are toggling this like drastic value conflict of being community oriented by nature in an individualistic oriented space.
Right. Right.
And so I hope that we are the generation that are actually struggling in this like value dynamic and figure it out for the next generation so there can be healthier female friendships. The
Right.
most profound relationship you can have is with another woman.
Yeah.
And that level of connection with culture, with community, with heart, soul, spirit is so deep because only a woman really gets another woman.
Yeah, 100%. And I think we have these fears, right? Especially when it comes to connecting with another South Asian female at times. It's like, oh, even though we might have been through the same exact things in our life, but the fear of talking about it, the fear of opening up, the fear of being judged at times as well. Because for me, at least, like when it comes to my non-Indian friends, I would just open up with them about anything and everything.
Everything. Yeah.
And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, this I can tell them everything and no filter whatsoever." And I still feel and I think that, that's being vulnerable. And every time I've tried when it comes to Indians, and again, this can be my own fear as well,
Uh-huh.
I've always just kind of, been really careful, very, very careful, just very
Wow.
nervous. Like, is this the right thing to do or not? And I think it has to do with obviously experiences that I've had in my life.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, Sunana, you just made me realize something in this moment. My number one struggle, ironically, as a therapist and as a person, is being vulnerable. I'm very good at making it seem like I'm vulnerable because I've learned the tricks and tips on how to do this, but
Yeah.
genuinely being vulnerable, there's a lot of fear around it for me. What I just realized while you were talking is because so many South Asian female friendships have disappointed me. They've abandoned me, they've left me, there's just been a lot of anxiety, they've broken my trust. That vulnerability is so caged because it wants to just be protected. And it's been hurt
Oh my
over and
goodness.
over. So thank you.
That's
Thank you for that realization. That just feels so healing and profound.
and you know
Thank
what? It's so interesting because the fact that you're sharing this with me and I'm connecting with you on such a deep level, I'm thinking to myself, there are probably so many women out there who feel exactly as we do. And that's why we have, as soon as we meet another South Asian person, especially when it comes to females, we have this wall up and we're like, you know what? There's no point of even she's going to behave this way with me or she's going to do this because this is what we've known.
Yeah, and so again, we go in with these expectations and we set ourselves up for failure in a way too. We
Yeah.
don't even really give anyone a chance
Yeah.
anymore because we're trying to
Yeah.
protect ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. It's so true. But the fact that we're open and we still want to be able to, for me, I'm like, okay, if I get hurt again, it is what it is. This heart has been broken before. At this point, I'm like, it's okay. Like, I'm going to try my best and I'm still going to open my heart
Mhm.
and I'm not going to be closed off and just all recognizing that as well and
Mhm.
understanding that I still because you have to keep opening your heart, like right people will come through. We connected. So, the fact that we're talking about all of this, I didn't even think this conversation would
Yeah.
end up this way, but it's so deep and it's so relatable for many.
And
Yeah.
love is pain. Love is the good feeling. A lot of people think if you're in a beautiful new relationship, love is this magical butterfly emotion. But if you are a person that just went through a breakup, love is painful. And
Yeah.
what we forget is love is none of those things and all of those things. Love is an experience of the highs and the lows and everything in between.
Yeah.
And if love was always at its high, we never would even see it at its high. It would just be
Exactly.
boredom. And
Yeah.
so, how beautiful to be able to open your heart and go through the pain because when you open your heart and you feel that joy, it makes it worth it because you understand the pain and the value for that joy is
Yeah.
exponentially greater.
It's not easy, but I think it's a journey, and
Mhm.
to be able to keep going and learning about yourself and learning about others too. And I guess oh my goodness, I can talk to you for hours, but my last question would be advice to your younger self, if you had
Mhm.
one advice.
Advice to my younger self. Wow. Oh man, you caught me there. I would say if I called my younger self and got a chance to connect with her, I would tell her play so much more. At a young age, I remember when I was 9, one of the biggest compliments I would keep getting over and over is, "You're so mature for your age." And I look back today and I'm like, wow, how sad. How sad for that 9-year-old that she didn't get to be a child and be silly and playful and not be mature. Because as an adult, we have to be that and we don't have that choice.
Yeah.
And so, my advice would be go make so many mistakes and have so much fun making mistakes and get dirt all over your face and be silly and be playful and be immature, because all of those things teach you your essence. It teaches you the root of who you are. And as an adult, when someone asks what is maturity, I tell them to be able to play so much that you're not feeling embarrassed about yourself and you're not worried about anyone's judgment.
Yeah.
That is ultimate maturity because you are so tapped into your inner child then.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, beautifully said. It's funny because I was the opposite. I was the kid who was always called immature for too long.
I
Even being,
love that. I
even
love that.
even being 16 and 17, my dad would be like, "You're so immature." Friends would be like, "Oh my goodness, Nana, grow up." And I
You're like, wait,
still,
I'm
and I
already mature, actually. You just don't know it.
exactly. And I think for me, I still have that childlike personality, and I think that that'll never fade. And I appreciate it a lot more now because for the longest time I would doubt myself and say, okay, I need to be more responsible. But there's also beauty behind just being careless and just living your life and just going with the flow. It's less
Yes.
exhausting, and it's just, you live in the moment more.
Absolutely. And that is feminine energy. It's flowing through life and knowing that all the responsibilities will just be weaved into that flow.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That was a great conversation. So fulfilling. My heart is like overjoyed.
I feel very full of myself. So thank you for creating this space and starting this podcast, and meeting you has been a deep pleasure.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.